Hello and welcome. I am Exit Light and this is my channel. Today we're going to discuss a mysterious case of a child who went missing. It's mysterious because there are many twists and turns to this case and questions that have never been answered. Perhaps, maybe someone will hear this story and remember something. Just a little something that could help solve this case. Before we get started, there is a large thunderstorm going on behind me. If you hear the noise of that, I am sorry. Also, if you would please subscribe to my channel, I would greatly appreciate it. Also, if you would give this channel a thumbs up, then that will help me be seen and recommended to other viewers. You can always go back at the end of this story and take back your thumbs up. And if you'd like to be notified of new content when it goes up, go ahead and click that bell. However, there's something new going on with the bell, and if you'll notice somewhere on your screen, when you do click that bell, it will give you 3 options: to be notified every time there's new content, occasionally when there's new content, or rarely when there's new content. I would appreciate it if you would click for every time there's new content. However, please make sure you click until you do get the option that you would like. All right, let's talk about this case, shall we? This is the case of 5-year-old Stephen McKerron. Stephen was visiting his aunt and uncle. They were vacationing. They were at the rugged countryside near the craggy coast of Ayr in South Ayrshire, Scotland. The place was once called Butlins Ayr, and it opened in 1946. It was designed to be an all-inclusive resort. The resort had a boat lake, it had games, it had an amusement park, it had rides, it had a tennis court, on and on and on. It was a place where both children and adults could stay, relax, and have a great time together. It changed its name to Wondercrest World in 1982 and then Craig Terra in 1999. It was built on 110 acres, and the view from this campsite was beautiful. It was the coast of Ayr. It was lovely, and Stephen had very much been looking forward to going with his aunt and uncle, and the highlight of this trip for him was the amusement park, as would be for most 5-year-old boys. So, on September 19th of 1988, Stephen's aunt and uncle, Lynn and Ian Snedden, were in charge of this rambunctious 5-year-old who was excited to go to this amusement park. And as they were standing talking for a moment and watching Stephen play on the escalator, a group of people walked between them and Stephen. It wasn't a big deal. They had their eye on Stephen, and as soon as the people moved out and kept on their way, Stephen was no longer on the escalator. This didn't alarm them. They knew that they had seen him 2 seconds ago. So they called out. They called his name. Stephen, Stephen. And they didn't hear back. They didn't hear anything. They never heard a scream. They never heard their names being called. They never heard anything that would make them suspicious of anything. They thought the boy probably just began to wander around. So they too began to wander around and call his name. They couldn't find him. He was not responding to them, so they called park officials, and park officials joined the search. They too walked around the park, yelling, "Stephen, Stephen," and they couldn't find him. The aunt and the uncle then began to get that feeling in their stomach. That feeling, if you've ever had a child leave your sight and you haven't been able to find them for a few minutes, that knot in your stomach. And they asked the park to call the police. It was at that moment that their exciting vacation became a living nightmare. The police were called in and an extensive search began. They searched in a 6-mile radius. They brought in air and land crews. They brought in dive crews to look in the lakes and the rivers and the ponds. The airplanes flew in a 6-mile radius looking for a small boy. There was a witness who said that they had seen him in one of the dining areas with a man. The man seemed to be comforting the child, that he seemed to look as though he was in some sort of distress. So this led the police to believe that perhaps he was kidnapped. But there were other people who said that they had seen him trying to climb the 7-foot fence that surrounded the amusement park, which didn't seem likely. And then there were others who said that they had seen the boy walking down a road. He seemed to be quiet, disoriented, wandering alone down the road. No one stopped to ask if he needed help. And then, after 16 days, Stephen was found. After what became one of Scotland's largest ever search for a missing child, a call came in from a woman who had been walking a dog and found a 5-year-old's body curled up in a ditch. His body was found where airplanes and search dogs had been looking. These airplanes were equipped with infrared cameras to spot any heat in the area. They had flown along this road where people had reported seeing a small child. It seems nearly impossible that this child could have walked from this huge amusement park, from this camp, and walked 6 miles alone. The coroner said that he had no injuries. He suspected no foul play. There was nothing done to his body that would suggest anything other than the fact that he had walked. In fact, the cause of death was exposure to the weather. But there were some odd things that happened as well. Namely, his bright red coat had been taken off. No one ever found it. Ever. Why would a child walking in the cold take off his coat? We'll never know. Also, it seemed as though he had stopped along the way, removed his shoes, taken off his socks, stuffed them in his pockets, and put his shoes back on. But his parents both said that that was impossible. Stephen had to have been taken because Stephen hadn't learned how to put his shoes back on yet. It's impossible that this child left an amusement park, walked 6 miles through rugged terrain that was hard for adults to get through, let alone a 5-year-old child with no scratches, no injuries, and somehow in that trip took his coat off, and it was never found, not by a search dog, not by the people walking through here, not by the airplanes and helicopters. And he had sat down, taken his shoes off, and taught himself how to put his shoes back on. How is that possible? It doesn't seem likely. The police say that they think he probably ran away. Now, I am a mother. I have had a 5-year-old decide that she was going to run away. Most 5-year-olds run away when they think that they have been punished unfairly. A toy that they like has been taken away. Perhaps they can't watch a show on TV that they really wanted to watch. My 5-year-old walked to the end of the block, which was one house over from our home, and she decided that the world was a scary and dangerous place. One house over. And also, she was hungry. Her tummy was growling, and perhaps running away was extreme. She came back, asked for a sandwich, and that was that. I don't think most 5-year-olds make it further than that, let alone run away from an amusement park in a camping area that you are on vacation with your aunt and uncle with. Something very, very exciting. And then again, why would somebody take a child just to abandon them 6 miles later? Take their coat, let them stand in the ditch, walk through bushes and thickets to get into the ditch, and just leave them. It doesn't make sense, especially when people had seen him walking. But the police are holding on to the idea that he did run away. And when one of the police officers was interviewed on TV, he made this statement when asked, "Why do you think Stephen ran away?" Officer Jerry Gallagher answered this: "I think he was a little boy who was missing his mother and father, who was homesick, and was trying to make his way home to Hamilton, which makes the whole incident even sadder." And so far, that is the story that the police are sticking by, even though his parents say that the clues that they have, especially the fact that he took his shoes off, put his socks in his pockets, and somehow managed to teach himself how to put his shoes on and tie them for the first time ever, alone and cold and afraid. It doesn't make sense to them. It doesn't make sense to me. And unfortunately, without anyone coming forward, the case of Stephen McKerron is likely to go down in history as one of the strangest missing child cases ever, and unfortunately unsolved.